Kobi, there's Rebecca, and this is Erin and Carolyn. Say hi to everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Rebecca, that's Carolyn, and I'm Erin McCole Cupp. I'm the author of Jane E. Friendless Orphan, a series, a memoir, or the memoirs of Jane E. Friendless Orphan. Oh gosh, it helps to know the name of your own books. And I'd like to welcome you all to perhaps the most fragmented of our Sabbath Rest Book Talks that we have ever had. Yes, folks, Sabbath Rest Book Talk, where fiction is good for you, where we celebrate all the good things that fiction does for us, for our souls, and for our humanity. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our co-hostesses this evening here on this lovely Pentecost. I know what the problem is. I'm speaking in tongues. It's Pentecost, so I must be speaking in tongues. That explains it all. So, yeah, let's introduce Carolyn Astfalk, another Pennsylvania gal out there. Say hi, Carolyn.
Hello. Good evening. Happy Pentecost.
Carolyn is the author of the recently released Rightfully Ours, a young adult romance about what is rightfully ours. And she's got another book, Ornamental Graces, that's an adult contemporary romance, and then Stay With Me, another adult contemporary romance. Carolyn does spicy clean stuff that's clean but with a little edge to it, so I like it. And then we've got Rebecca over there from Pure Michigan. Say hi, Rebecca.
Hello.
There she is. I think Rebecca's computer has been speaking in tongues. Rebecca works for the Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist out there in Ann Arbor, and she's a sort of our YA expert as well. Has done a lot of stuff with young adult reading. And so without further ado, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to discuss tonight. Tonight's theme for Sabbath Rest Book Talk is suffering. Now, wow, what a delightful subject, right? The reason I kind of wanted to go with suffering for June is because for us wacky Catholics, June is the month of the Sacred Heart. And even if you're not Catholic, you've probably seen like either a statue or a painting or maybe even a tattoo of Jesus with the heart. And there's, you know, a big giant stab wound in it, and the crown of thorns squeezing the heart. And a lot of times you'll see like a fountain of flame coming out of the top, and you'll see bright light pouring forth from this heart. And one of the many things that it tells us is that God's love for us is so bright and so strong and so powerful and so passionate that he will suffer for us, go through unimaginable agony just for a chance to get to us, just for a chance for us to say no to him. So that tells us the background that the three of us here on Sabbath Rest Book Talk that we come from tells us that no suffering is wasted if you point it in the right direction. And our books kind of either talk about that tonight or talk about the danger of acting like suffering is something we're supposed to hide from, and the fear of suffering and how that actually holds us back and doesn't let us go forward. So the book I kind of want to start with tonight is, I want to start with What Do You Do with a Problem by Kobi Yamada. Who's got a copy of that? I think Rebecca, do you have that book here today? Yep. What Do You Do with a Problem? Okay, you see, it's a children's read aloud, and I ran across that book on a list on Pinterest of books that promote a growth mindset, books that promote the idea that where you are now is not where you will always be. So I took that out and from the library, yay, Ackland Library, my favorite library in the world, and read it to my youngest. And what I really liked about it is, I think maybe the language was pretty simple, and I think maybe a little vague, but it did tell the story of this little character. I don't even think his name is in the book, is it? It's just...
I don't think so.
Right, he's just...
really
first person, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's first person. You don't get his name. So that kind of helps us put ourselves in his place. And he has this problem he's trying to run from. And I think my only complaint about it was that the wording was sort of vague, but maybe somebody can talk about how that might have been a good thing. I can see how, talking sort of obliquely about a problem helps the reader put him or herself in the shoes of this sort of generic person. Oh gosh, I forget what that's called. There's a literary term for it. Rebecca, can you help me out? Do you remember?
There is, and I can't remember it.
Okay. Maybe if we speak in tongues again,
That could work.
somebody will interpret.
No,
Go ahead. Sorry.
My brain immediately went to where's my literary dictionary, but I don't have it, so I can find it.
Okay.
No, but on the vague language topic, I kind of felt that it lessened the impact a little bit just because it didn't seem concrete. It's like if you're old enough and mature enough to understand how to identify a problem, to know like a problem in your life that you've had a similar experience with, then it makes sense. But I think for a kid that's kind of just like, problem? What problem? My main problem is, when I don't get to watch a movie that I want to watch. It might be a little less impactful, but I thought the pictures really told the story perhaps better than the words did.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for a child, you probably need to give an example and walk them through it. I haven't read this one with my children yet. I'm going to. So for me, I didn't even realize it was being very vague. But now when I think about it in terms of kids, they need something concrete to relate it to understand it, I think. But the illustrations you mentioned, what's interesting is having read that and then our other book, A Monster Calls, which had the illustrations, and going back to this one, I was struck by how similar they were.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even see that connection. Our other book, A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness, that is about a story about a middle school boy whose parents are divorced and his mother is dying of cancer. And there's this yew tree that kind of attacks him. I don't know how else to explain it. Sorry, go ahead.
That's pretty much what he does.
Yeah, this yew tree attacks the boy, and there are illustrations in that as well that help tell the story. And exactly like Carolyn said, the illustrations were very crosshatchy. There was lots of lines, thin lines going back and getting bigger and getting smaller, and sort of showing how that feeling of anxiety and fear and the balking at suffering, how that looks. And go ahead.
The black and white too. I thought there's a little bit of color in What Do You Do with the Problem, but it's all very muted. The primary colors really are black and white, and I think that it works really well because I know, at least for me, like when I'm bogged down with something or I'm depressed or anxious or whatever, like everything just feels gray, and it's like there's no color in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it sort of showed, and it's interesting because I am such a verbal thinker, and one of my kids is a very visual thinker, and so like I'm the kind of person that I don't want to bother with illustrations. I just want to read the words because the words are going to give me that picture in my mind faster than the illustrations are. But books like A Monster Calls and What to Do with a Problem that show in a visual way what those feelings look like inside your soul, I think really, shows the power of art, and also kind of shows us what it looks like inside of us when we're running from something that's scary or painful, or even just some sort of change, really. What did you guys think of A Monster Calls?
I loved it. I had never seen it before. Never seen it, never heard of it. And I was a little skeptical because I'm like, pictures, young adult book, But it was fantastic the way that it because on the one hand, it's a very short plot. I mean, essentially, kid's mom is dying of cancer. There's not really much that necessarily happens as far as like space and time sort of thing, but the way that it delves very deeply into a young man's suffering and having to face it and having to figure out how to deal with it, I thought was just really well done.
Carolyn, what did you think? I saw on your Facebook page that you had posted a quote.
Oh yeah, I love that quote, and I probably can't remember it word for word, but basically about the importance of fiction, which is what we're talking about. And I'll tell you, I really liked the book. I don't know that I loved it. Maybe I expected more of it, and at the beginning I had trouble turning off my inner editor, honestly, because I kept, and maybe it was purposeful, but things like I was like, well, how old is this kid? I don't know how old he is, and where is this set at? Because I think we got to page like 30, 40 until that stuff was revealed, and I'm like, oh, he's using adverbs. And so once I was able to put aside my nitpicky stuff, I did love the story. And I expected, though, the end to be more teary. I don't know if I'm just cold-hearted, but I wasn't anywhere near tears at the end, but I did still appreciate the ending. I'm happy to have my son read it, and I think it's an excellent book in a lot of ways. I just probably was a little underwhelmed by what I felt, I think. That makes sense.
Oh, maybe I blew it up too much. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm one of those people that I'll cry at like a nail polish commercial. So like, I think I went through 5 or 6 tissues when I read A Monster Calls. I mean, it was all towards the end.
I definitely teared up, and part of the reason I did is I lost my grandmother a couple of years ago, shortly after I moved out of the house.
See, now I'm going to cry already, but go on.
Nobody got time for that right now. But to me, it felt very real.
Yeah, no, it felt really real for me too. And again, it's the story of how we all tend to run from our problems, and they only chase us down. So that was really, really a powerful thing for me to read as well. And I liked how so many different details of that story all ended up tying in together. Like the significance of the yew tree, not just, symbolically, and then imagery as this monster, but also as something that can both kill and cure, is goading the main character on, and showing, sort of like bringing forth the things that he's going to do with his pain, that he's going to, beat somebody up and just destroy things, and how dangerous we can become ourselves when we don't face the suffering that's in our lives. So I kind of thought that was powerful. Any more thoughts on A Monster Calls before we go on to The Moviegoer?
Well, what I saw also in A Monster Calls was how, on the one hand, how the monster behaves and what he does seems almost irrational at first. It seems very arbitrary. And then eventually you see how he's forcing the main character to breaking point so that he can actually face his problems, and that the suffering that he deals with through the monster is paralleling his emotional suffering, but it's also like forcing him to, it's kind of enabling him to, I guess, in the end, use that suffering for something good, to heal his perspective and his relationships.
Carolyn, how about you?
I think too, when you go back to the tree and its symbolism, I didn't even think about this at the time, but later, and as a Christian, the tree is full of such symbolism too. That
my gosh, I didn't even think of that. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I didn't either immediately. It wasn't until like a day later, like, yeah, the tree. It's a tree. Yeah, it's not by any means a Christian book in any way, but that's part of what I could read into it there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know nothing about the author's faith background, but you know, even if the author has absolutely no faith background at all, you still see that image in lots of different cultures of a tree. And
well, yeah, it's like Norse mythology too.
yes, exactly. And it's like God is always just planting little clues all over the place of how to find him and how to find that strength in suffering and how to find new life through suffering. And that we just kind of have to embrace it. And if we don't, it's just going to keep chasing us down and getting bigger, usually, like the tree. And the other thing, one last thing about A Monster Calls, what I liked is how, as an adult, I was reading this and thinking, okay, this yew tree, his interactions with this yew tree, they're all about his, the characters. It's just a manifestation of his own, agony. And it's imaginary. It's something that's happening in his imagination, and the power of imagination and the power of stories on our imagination. But then at the end of so many chapters, there's yew leaves and twigs on the floor. And there's always this evidence. So you're never quite sure like what's real and what's imaginary. The only thing that stays real is the pain. And I thought that was really very powerful to me. That the reality of pain and where that can bring us. So speaking of reality and escaping from it, let's talk about The Moviegoer by Walker Percy. This book was written published at least in 1961. It was Walker Percy's debut work, and it won the National Book Award that year. And it's about this Korean, very young, he's about to turn 29, Korean War veteran. His name is Binks, and he's, he comes from wealth. He has all of these different opportunities available to him, but he turns them all down, basically. And it's not like he turns them all down to go join, I was about to say Peace Corps, but there was no Peace Corps in 1961, I don't think. I think it was like 62 or 60. Anyway, long story short, he turns everything down and like wants to spend his time, how did they say it in here, dallying with girls, dallying with his secretaries, because he's a stockbroker. He's just making money, and that's all he wants to do. But he, even through all of this distraction, he distracts himself by going to movies and reading books. And it's not because he wants to learn from them, it's because he wants to distract him and just experience experiences that aren't his own. And eventually we find out that he, experienced a horrible wound in the Korean War. So you kind of get the sense that he's hiding from that trauma and other traumas in his life. Like he wants to isolate himself from those things and just cover everything up with sensations. Now, Carolyn, you didn't get a chance to finish, right?
No, I'm not finished.
Okay. And Rebecca, you finished, but not feeling
Let's
it?
just say I could probably take a class on Walker Percy and maybe understand him a little bit better. I mean, it's one of those books where he's up there with like Graham Greene and Flannery O'Connor and sometimes Evelyn Waugh, where it's like, I know you've got a really good message at the bottom of this. I'm just having to like fight through to find it. So
I think the problem is that that we might be inclined to read it, and I think it's being called to read more like a poem, if that makes sense.
actually works.
The one thing that somebody wrote, oh gosh, the back blurb on the copy that I have is, okay, there we go. Percy managed to combine Bourbon Street elegance with the spiritual urgency of a Russian novel. And here's true confessions time. Erin has never read a Russian novel. I have tried Anna Karenina, Back to the Library After 2 days. I have tried Brothers Karamazov, Back to the Library After 2 days. And it's not like I don't like long books. I love Dickens. But it was just like, I couldn't get into it. So then you've got this skinny little book and they're comparing it to a Russian novel. And I'm like, no, they're not. And then as soon as I was thinking that to myself, like, oh, this is that sense of spiritual malaise. And I think he even uses that word over and over again in here, malaise.
Yeah.
That it's condensed. Because we're American, we condense everything. So it's condensed. And I think if we look at it as poetry rather than as story, we're going to get more sense out of it. And also not so much sense out of it, because you don't in general read a good poem to make sense out of it. You read a good poem to get a feeling that is too complex for prose. So I think the feeling that I did like this, and I did see the sense of him going from, you know, these places, you know, Bourbon Street and the where the wealthy neighborhood where his family lives, and to his, you know, concrete suburb outside of New Orleans, to, you know, road trips with these, you know, I don't want to call them floozies, because it's not really floozies. You can see that that Percy sees the his secretaries as people.
Mm-hmm.
And he's showing how Binks doesn't see them as people because he doesn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
But then how he does see his cousin, I mean, it says cousin, they're like related by marriage. His cousin Kate, who is going through some mental illness challenges, which in 1961 was like, if you think people throw medication around like popcorn now, it was kind of even worse then, because there wasn't as much, and mental health care was not the best. It's nothing to write home about now, but it was rougher even then.
Right.
So she's going through a lot, and you can kind of see how they both want, Kate and Binks want something great, but they're afraid to go for it. Is that making any sense? What do you guys want to chime in on that?
Well, I'll chime in since I've only read the small portion. Something that struck me about the moviegoer, and then as I look back the other two books, I think it always goes hand in hand with suffering, is this loneliness that I see Binks as, despite his dalliances and his family, he strikes me as a lonely man. And the same when you find in the other two books. I just think suffering naturally begets loneliness, which is, you know, what calls us as humans and Christians then to reach out to other people, you know, and we find that good in suffering, that there's this more to be learned and more to be felt and accomplished through it. But I think there's a natural loneliness that I feel in all these cases of suffering.
Yeah, what I found interesting too, about the moviegoer is, like, he's built his little alternate reality for himself. He has a vocabulary. He has a different vocabulary. He has his routines, his almost ceremonies, as far as like going to the movies and stuff like that. Like, he is so much not wishing to face the reality of his own suffering that he's built his own little world. And it's interesting because I think the only connection between him and really the real world is Kate, and that in her suffering and in trying to help her in his limited way through her suffering, he's able to connect a little bit.
And what I think, what kind of struck me at the end was that he, in the end, it was like Binks wanted to isolate himself from anything that might end up being ordinary. And I don't want to spoil anything much for Carolyn or anybody else who hasn't read The Moviegoer, I guess. But in the end, what he ends up choosing is really ordinary. And I kind of saw through you know, his choice, his hope, and Kate's hope.
Sorry.
What
just happened? Oh my god.
Two of you.
Speaking in tongues.
She's
My phone was
bilocating.
dying, so I thought I'd switch to the laptop, and I think I just caused chaos. I'm sorry.
So she's bilocating. You can't. So yeah, we're talking about The Ordinary, and there's two Rebeccas. Okay.
My phone was dying.
Okay. Now you're back to life on your laptop.
And I can hear this
See, this is so much fun. I don't know if anybody watching is having fun. I am having a blast, and really, I hope you two are as well, and that's really all that matters.
I'm just causing chaos, you know, it's my middle name.
So anyway, back to depressing Southern Gothic Catholic literature. I was talking about, I don't even remember, I was saying something about The Ordinary and Extraordinary, and
ends up choosing The Ordinary.
Yeah, he ends up choosing what everybody expected him to choose. And when I read it, I got the sense of, like, there was sort of like a, I guess in our culture, we're always taught, don't settle, don't settle. But there was this sense of tenuous peace that he got by doing what was expected of him. And Kate kind of got that too, but you still got that undercurrent of fear. And isn't that what suffering, like our first reaction to suffering is usually fear? I mean, we even see it in that, oh golly gee, what is the name of that icon where Mary is... Oops, we lost her. There she is.
Oh.
Is it Our Lady of Perpetual Help? Where the sandal is falling off the baby Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, Our Lady of
Perpetual
Perpetual Help.
Help.
Like, even Christ as a child, when he had a vision of his future, he ran to his mom and, like, ran so fast that his shoe fell off or was falling off. But that our first reaction as humans is we want to insulate ourselves from it, run from it, do anything but suffer. And how I think I kind of saw in Binks's choice, the kind of thing that I do is, like, I'll go through it, white knuckle my way through something really difficult and scary, and then, like, stop and do something calm and hope that the scary thing doesn't happen again, that I don't get scared again, hope that I don't have to suffer again. But the reality is we all have to suffer. So instead of going to movies, just face what's there and face reality instead of going to movies. Anybody else?
I just kind of tying this back to what we're even doing here. Reading a book like this instead of watching a movie, useful in the sense that it gives us tools rather than, like, the way that movies is to escape and to run away, not to experience and learn, which I think is something that we can do through fiction. And I think sometimes you can do through movies. I just think Binks doesn't do it.
Well, I think, I know in my life I've escaped, and not in a healthy way, to books.
Same.
Not use them for tools, not use them for conflict resolution ideas, just ran away. And that's why, like, for a long time, I would just reread the same books over and over again. And they weren't even, like, high quality books either. They were good books, but they weren't, like, you know, deep, multi-leveled books. And it was anything to distract the mind from the pain. Whereas I think movies can be, you know, visual books in a way, quality ones, that if we are disposed to taking the tools from them, we can. And
yeah.
And I think that's kind of what, like a movie, we can watch a movie, but a movie can kind of watch us. we can read a book, but a book can kind of read us too. Now, Carolyn, what did you want to add to the discussion on your first steps into the moviegoer before we close up?
It really was just that thought of the loneliness, and it kind of strikes a mood too, the same way, I guess almost I would say the way Percy writes, and it's the first time I've read anything by Walker Percy, although I've been meaning to for a long time. His descriptions almost give me the same sense as the illustrations gave in the other books in parts. With they just kind of strike a mood in you, and really, I don't know. It helps. I think helps you understand the book on a more, maybe a more guttural level or something, not just cerebrally, but feeling.
Yeah. No, I hear that. I agree. The language was very, especially towards the beginning, it was very cold.
Yeah.
And just descriptive, and you could feel you could feel a chill, which is strange because it happens in New Orleans, but it happens in New Orleans in Mardi Gras, so that's in winter. All sorts of layers. But anyway, I'm looking for. This is something I want to reread again, just because I know, Carolyn, months ago I told you that I thought of this book as like a grown-up Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
And I don't like the Catcher in the Rye. Sorry.
I don't either, but I don't either.
So it's sort of a facing down of our own coldness, I think.
Yeah.
So anyway. All right. And so last question for you ladies is, what was your favorite selection from this month? Mine was Monster Calls. I just thought that was really, really powerful. How about you guys? Carolyn, what was your favorite?
I think I like the children's book, What to Do with a Problem. I think its simplicity just appeals to me. Just, it's very clear what's our natural response when we have a problem. We try to get rid of it. We worry. Just its simplicity struck me. I enjoyed it.
All right, cool. How about you, Rebecca? What was your favorite?
I think for me, a Monster Calls as well, because I think there's a dearth of good fiction that helps children deal with grief. Honestly, I think the only other one I've read is Where a Red Fern Grows. And that doesn't, I think, deal with it the same way. I think this was very real. I honestly wish that I had read it as a teenager.
Yeah, it's funny because we just finished listening to the audiobook of A Bridge to Terabithia, which is, I think, another really good book for showing kids, the effects of grief. And I think, though, that one doesn't, A Bridge to Terabithia is sort of like the how to deal with reactions to tragedy, where A Monster Calls is more about how to deal with the build-up to a tragedy that is coming and you probably can't stop. So it's more about the helplessness going into tragedy rather than the helplessness after a tragedy. So I think they're both really good books, just for different approaches. So, all right, ladies, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Everybody who's watching, thank you for joining us tonight. Please join us again. I want to let you know, for July, our topic is revolution, because we're all Americans here. And, well, on this show, you personally watching might not be American, and that's okay. But our topic for July is going to be revolution, and our books are on my website, erinmccolecupp.com. And we're actually going to be going July 9th. So it's the second Sunday at 7 p.m. for next month. Veritas, everybody. Have a good night. Take care. Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.